Swinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to start by congratulating the Honourable Gentleman for Cannock Chase and indeed all the members of the committee who put so much work into the proposals that we were able to discuss today. Although I do share the disappointment expressed by many others about the way that this process has been dealt with since the publication of the Wright Committee report. In that report, it was made clear that the committee would like, within 2 months, these proposals to be voted on by the House. We are more than 3 months after the committee's proposals were indeed published, and I think it would be a fair characterisation and perhaps even charitable to say that the government has somewhat dragged its heels on this issue, only announcing the date for this debate after being questioned week in, week out in business questions. And in fact, it's taken longer for the government to bring forward these proposals for debate than it took the committee to form, call for evidence, consider the evidence, meet, debate and come up with all of the proposals. So I do think that the lack of urgency that the government has given this has perhaps not shown the level of priority within government that I certainly would have liked to see for this important subject of reform. I also think that it seems to have been the subject of almost confusion about the different parts of the motions that will be put forward and how that can be done, when actually, on page 94 of the committee's report, there was a sample motion drafted and ready to just be put in front of the House so that we could discuss it, rather than the government deciding, after asking a committee to investigate an issue and bring forward recommendations, the government then deciding which ones it would cherry pick in order to put them to the House. In any case, I would say that the proposals in the Wright Committee report are somewhat timid. I do agree with those who say they're a step in the right direction, but I would describe them perhaps as a baby step. And given the difficulty that we have had in even getting to this stage of the debate, it's been like trying to take a baby step through treacle. I do appreciate the committee was constrained on its terms of reference, and I think that was an interesting exchange earlier where there was a lot of interest expressed on different sides of the House for taking forward some of the ideas that were not able to be developed in full within the confines of the Reform Committee. But I think too much was left to later decision or future review, rather than strong and robust recommendations, whether that's on the issue of September sittings or public bill committees, or indeed the issue of public engagement, which I will return to in my remarks. I think it is worth asking ourselves, why is reform so necessary and so vital? And we need to remember this is in the context of the reputation of Parliament, and indeed of our democracy itself, having been dragged through the mire in recent months. Obviously, cleaning up our discredited expenses system is a vital part of the solution, but it is only part of the solution. Back in May, I asked hundreds of my constituents who are signed up to an online consultation what they thought was necessary to restore faith in politics. And I received dozens and dozens of answers, alongside people saying that we needed to have transparency and ending personal profit through the expenses system, and proper sanctions when people did things that were wrong, and a new expenses system. Much wider issues also came back in that consultation, and that was even in the context of the expenses scandal being at its height. My constituents were bringing up issues such as electoral reform and the way that we actually make sure that votes count in whatever constituency you are in the UK, rather than only in some marginal constituencies. And even the issue of reform of the House of Commons was a theme that came back in that consultation exercise. Very commonly, people were saying to me they thought that the power of the whips should be reduced compared to the power and the influence of individual independent-minded MPs. Now, some of these reforms in terms of electoral select committees will help in terms of rebalancing that power, because that will reduce the power of patronage of the whips' offices. Scheduling business with a committee that is representative of Parliament rather than just government will enable individual MPs to better hold government to account. My name, alongside more than 120 other honourable members, is attached to the amendment in favour of the House Business Committee in today's order paper, even though that cannot be voted on tonight. And I just think it's important to remember that this is how parliaments work across the world. We have this system also in the Scottish Parliament, and the sky doesn't fall in. If a committee of people drawn from across a Parliament actually decide what that Parliament will discuss. And so actually I believe this is a very important reform. I will certainly give way to the Minister.
Thank you. I thank the member for giving way. I'm just looking at an article by Dr. Meg Russell where she says not to be too romantic about those notions, because in fact those cross-party business committees tend to be dominated by whips, and I think that is the case in Scotland as in many other places. And I think it's as we take this issue forward, I think we're going to have to be very careful about comparisons with other places.
I certainly agree that what's proposed is not a perfect solution. However, she will know that in the report's recommendations that backbenchers will also be represented. And I think that is a very important part of the representation. It was mentioned earlier whether newer MPs will be represented, and I think if a business committee is properly elected, then yes, if we have a large proportion of new members in the House after the next election, I think it's highly likely and will be desirable that new members would also be elected to that business committee. And it's about who sets the agenda. I can understand why it's very convenient for the government for them to do so, but I don't think there's any really good argument why it should be the government that does so, particularly in our system where we have governments elected without a majority of the popular vote. Parliament, not government, needs to control what we debate within the proviso that we understand that a government that is elected and has a manifesto should have the ability of having time to put its business to the House. I think one of the things that's problematic is that the current way that scheduling works is that controversial parts of bills often don't get discussed in this House properly at all. And if you have Parliament setting the agenda rather than just government, then the issues and the areas of bills that Parliament is most concerned about will be the ones that get given the most time. As MPs, we need to be able to influence the agenda in order to represent our constituents, and actually I think this should just be a stepping stone in the right direction, because I want to see the public able to influence the agenda of this House as well as just MPs. On the issue of business and scheduling, it has been a source of huge frustration to me that there is so little advance notice of business, when we all know that government actually decides or has plans in advance of what day the second reading on this bill will be and what day the report stage on that bill will be. But it's used as a tool of control, and this information is not shared with the rest of the House. This is a ridiculous way to do business. I represent a constituency which is a 5 or 6 hour commute from this House. It makes a big difference to me whether the business on a particular Monday means that I will want to be here for the start of that at 3:30. That makes a difference as to whether or not I can hold a surgery on a Monday morning or not. And for this to be held out there as if we can't tell people because it's not decided, when actually it is decided, I think is ridiculous. You wouldn't find businesses operating that way with nothing planned more than 10 days in advance. You wouldn't find other professions operating in that way, and we should certainly operate in a much more organised way as well.
In what way will the House Business Committee stop that from happening? I mean, my understanding of the House Business Committee is actually that kind of issue. I mean, we're not going to have business scheduled months in advance. It'll still be, if not actually far worse and far less time ahead.
Well, I certainly think that by removing the power from government alone, you open up the door to start to have that debate. I'm agreeing that that will not necessarily be something that will follow. It's a point I was raising that I think is a ridiculous way in terms of how we plan business currently, and I would very much hope that House Business Committee, and I'll certainly be arguing for that to be the case, and I have some more confidence that if I have colleagues on that Business Committee that I know, that they might be more likely to listen to my views, and also it will be in everyone's interest, rather than it just being one party that knows what the business is that's going to be discussed on a particular day. But on to the issue that I really wanted to touch on, which is that of public involvement and engagement. The report is good on warm words in this, but it's very light on specific actions. At least it does open the door to greater public engagement in future, and suggests that this should be reviewed and looked at again in the new Parliament. But I do think this was a missed opportunity. And this is where I do have sympathy with the comments made by the Honourable Lady for North East Derbyshire in terms of the fact that this committee didn't perhaps look in fullness at all of the issues that it could have done. And I think on public engagement, there is so much that needs to be done, because this place is just so alien to most people that turn on BBC Parliament, if indeed they do, and watch what we're doing in this chamber and the way in which we do it. And there's so many opportunities, particularly with new technology, to reach out and engage the public better. And yet, this House seems so good at missing opportunities to do so. My honourable friend, the member for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, earlier mentioned the Procedure Committee's report on improving the petition system. Yes, they produced an excellent report, and what happened to it? Nothing. You know, we've had the report, they've said how we can do it, and yet we're still in a situation where we're saying, well, we should consider this, we should look at it at a future date. It's not rocket science, we could actually just get on and do it. 2 years ago, I started campaigning to allow clips of the filming of Parliament to be shown on YouTube so that people could share it with their friends or members of a pressure group that might be interested in a particular exchange. It's getting there, but it's such slow progress. Now we are allowed to put clips on YouTube, but there's ridiculous restrictions about not being able to share them or have comments that need to be moderated that are just wholly inappropriate for understanding how the internet works in terms of engagement. There's been an excellent campaign called Free Our Bills, which seeks to ensure that legislation online is presented in a way that is tagged to make it easy for the public to follow different stages and comment on what is happening. And again, it's just like the cogs move so slowly in this place to try to get change. I'm very much sympathetic to many of the points raised by the Honourable Member for Gloucester, which he also raised in the hustings speech that he made for the speakership election, about allowing our constituents to directly vote and express the things that they would like us to discuss, whether that's through online or telephone polls, whether it's through encouraging people to sign EDMs at which a certain number of signatures will require a debate to be held. There's no reason why we can't look to engage the public in these kind of ways. And I think it is a real shame that we don't yet have those proposals on the table to vote for today or indeed next Thursday when the many votes may happen. I do wholeheartedly hope that this report is not a conclusion to the process of reform, but it is a beginning, because we really need to radically increase public engagement in this place. The Honourable Member for Reading West talked about that process of reform. And I do just say to Honourable Members, people outside this place look in and they sometimes wonder what planet we are on, with our archaic rules, the procedural wranglings and the bizarre traditions that we have. The measures outlined in this report today represent modest progress, but progress nonetheless. I do think it's frustrating how even to get these mild reforms requires such energetic campaigning to get votes on the relevant parts and get 130 signatures so that we can actually have a discussion and a debate on a particular motion. But I'm glad that we are doing that, and I truly believe that this House will only be able to regain credibility and legitimacy in the eyes of the public when it wholeheartedly embraces reform, and currently this doesn't seem to be the case. Today, Mr. Speaker, we have heard impassioned voices from all sides of the House in favour of reform. We need to bank this report as the first step for that reform and work together in the forthcoming months and years to continue the process to create a House of Commons fit for the 21st century.